crafters! Welcome to my channel, Crafters Autonomous. It is Amanda here, bringing you another Tutorial Tuesday, or as I affectionately call them, tutus. So this week we are going to be doing a project that is both inspired by my compulsive, almost like hoarding habit, and by arm knitting. So if you haven't seen arm knitting before, pause this video, look up arm knitting, watch a couple of videos, but make sure you come back to finish this one. And basically arm knitting is where you have like giant chunky yarn and you knit with your arms instead of needles. So you guys may know how I feel about knitting. I have a lot of respect for people who knit, but let's be real, why knit when you can crochet? No, honestly, I think knitting's super cool. I just never really got into it myself and I've stuck with crochet. So today we are going to be doing some hand crocheting. Now, if you've ever looked into arm knitting before, you may have found that to buy the chunky yarn is crazy expensive. And so I've never actually bought the chunky yarn to do hand knitting or hand crocheting before. However, my mom was throwing out some old hand towels. So I got to thinking, why not turn this into some kind of chunky yarn and hand crochet or arm knit with this? So that's what we are doing today. We are going to be turning these hand towels into chunky yarn into this finished product. Okay, actually you can make whatever you want once you get to the yarn stage, but I'm going to show you how to make a rug just because it's a really simple pattern for that. As far as materials go, obviously you'll need some old towels. You will want a pair of scissors. I recommend using actual sewing scissors versus just like a pair of regular scissors, because the thing with sewing scissors is they're really sharp. And secondly, you've hopefully only ever used them on fabric. If you've used them on other materials, it will really dull them. So if you have a pair of sewing scissors, from now on only use them on fabric and ribbons and things. Don't ever use them on paper, but hopefully they'll be sharp enough that they will quickly cut through the hand towel. You may also optionally want a needle and some thread. That's just so that way once you finish cutting up one towel, you'll be able to attach it to the next towel that you cut up. If you don't want to do any hand sewing or any kind of sewing whatsoever, you can just tie it in knots. I will also recommend you may want to have a vacuum, because once you start cutting these, it will drop fuzz like everywhere. So I've got a little bit of vacuuming to do, so you may also want to vacuum on hand. But that's all we really need, so let's jump into this project. So the very first step with this project is cutting up the hand towel and turning it into the yarn. So I'm going to open this long ways, and I'm going to cut long ways because in my mind I feel like that's easier. I don't know if it actually is, it probably works out about the same. But I do like cutting it long ways because when we get to the end here, we're going to kind of let this be the turn, and so we'll have less of these turns, these kind of funky spots that you'll see in a minute if we cut long ways versus if we cut across the short ways. So I'm going to take my scissors and I'm just going to cut a long strip going down the side. I would recommend going about a ½ inch to 1 inch wide. I'm doing mine about the width of my thumb, but you can kind of just play around with the thickness you want. If you plan to do arm knitting, I would go thicker because when I arm knit with the ½ inch thickness, it didn't look as good. So I'm just going to hold this and start slicing down to the end of my towel. All right, now this is important. I'm getting to the end here and I'm going to cut all the way up to the end, but I'm not going to cut this border on the towel. This is where we're going to kind of have a turn because we're going to next make a cut coming this way, and so it'll kind of really be this long zigzaggy piece, and that we'll be able to kind of straighten out like this. But as you can see, we're going to have some spots that have this extra thickness here. Just make sure you don't cut all the way to the end. Now I'm actually going to make all my cuts in one direction first because I think that's a little easier. So when I go to make my next cut, instead of cutting once the thickness of this first piece, I'm going to cut twice the thickness of this first piece. And I will cut just like I did this first one where I will go all the way to the end but not actually cutting through. And then once I do all these cuts on this side, I'll come through and cut this in half. So again, right now I'm going twice the distance over and I'm going to cut across. And I'm just kind of eyeballing this because it doesn't make a huge difference if they're not exactly even. If you have one of those fancy cutting board things that with the groove, that would make it a lot easier, but I don't, so I'm just kind of eyeballing it. Again, when you get to the end, cut right up to, but not through, that edge border. And I would just keep cutting this double thickness across. Okay, I'm finding that cutting on a table, like a flat surface, is actually a lot easier than what I was doing. Earlier, I was holding this bottom end with my hands and I had my feet on this end to kind of hold it tight, but actually just leaving it lying on the table is working out pretty good. So this method works pretty good, or you can do the sit on the floor and pin it down so you have enough tension to cut through evenly method. Now, if you find your last section isn't wide enough for 2 more of these sets, but it's kind of like 1.5, then just cut a thin strip to the right and leave this other section wider, and then you can just cut down the middle of that on the way back. So now our towel looks a little something like this, and we have this end here that's still attached. So we're gonna flip the whole thing around, and on all these thick sections, I'm going to cut through. And I will do basically the same thing where I'm going to cut through the middle here, and I'll get all the way to the end, but I won't actually cut through the end. I will leave the end attached like I did here on this side. So I'm gonna find my thick piece and start slicing down the middle. So now you probably are getting the idea that we're turning this into one long piece instead of a towel. You may also notice at this point that there's a lot of little fuzzies coming off, so I'll need to vacuum those up later on. Just gonna finish cutting down these thicker sections, cutting them in half from the opposite side, so I can turn this towel into one long piece. So now I've gone from a towel to this nice big long mess. So I'm going to attach this to the ball of yarn that I already made right here. And again, your options are you can either just do a simple knot right here to fasten them together, which I'm personally not a fan of, but it's easy. Or you can quickly stitch the ends together. Which this isn't anything fancy, this is just a quick little stitch to just secure enough to hold it together. It doesn't need to be like super strong or anything. Just gonna tie that off there and snip it. So I'm gonna wind this up into my big ball of yarn, and then we will start working on actually hand crocheting. Alrighty, so if you know how to crochet, this is gonna come pretty easy to you. You just gotta learn how to do it by hand without using a hook. If you don't know how to crochet, that's okay too. It's not too bad to get the hang of, and I'll go through this slowly because we are doing it by hand. First thing we want to do is make a slip knot. The way I like to make slip knots is I like to cross this tail end over, so it's on top of the long end, come up this loop through the bottom, like so, grab this long end, and pull up a loop, and just kind of tighten this up, and that will create a slip knot. I'll show you that one more time. I'm going to cross my tail end over to make this loop, so this goes over that. Come up from the bottom, grab this long tail end, and I'm going to pull this tight. Cinch this up really good. This is going to make my slip knot. If you pull on this side, it's called a slip knot because if I pull on this side, I can change the size of my knot. It's a little snug just because the towel's so thick. So I'm going to get it down to about this size, and what I'm going to do next is what we call in crochet the chain. And to do this by hand, I'm going to put my 2 fingers through here. This is going to act as my hook. These 2 fingers, my thumb and my pointer finger, these are like my hook. And I'm going to grab this yarn here and pull up a loop. You want to pull up enough so it's about the same size as the first loop. That's one chain, and it's going to look kind of like this from the top. So I'm going to do this again. I'm going to chain a second time. So with my finger still in here, I'm going to grab a loop and pull it up. So when I pull my loop through, I'm going to grab it between these 2 fingers, pull it up. Now you see my index finger is coming from the back to the front, so I'm going to leave that finger there and bring my thumb through the loop in the same direction. And again, the trick with this is you want to make sure that you have your loops about the same size every time. So I'm going to pull this up so it's about the same size as my previous loops, and I'm going to pull up my next loop. This is called a chain. So just grab the yarn, pull it up, and insert your fingers in the loop from back to front. So I'm going to make mine 8 chain long. So that just means when it's all said and done, I will have a total of 8 stitches. So I've got 1, 2, 3, and I'm going to do it a total of 8 times. So I'm going to do 5 more. So pull up a loop, again size them the same size, pull up my next loop, pull up my next loop. And you just want to make this as long as you want your rug to be. So if we look at mine here, this is my first loop, so 1, 2, 3, 4, right here, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Once I've made it the length I want it to be, I'm going to do one more of these chains, which is where I just grab it and pull it up through. Now it's time to actually start working on our stitches. So I'm going to skip this first spot right here and come to this 8th loop on the left-hand side. I'm going to keep this loop on my hand. I'm going to take these 2 fingers and go down through that loop. So this loop that's on the left side of our piece here, I'm going to go down through it. Then I'm going to grab my yarn and pull up a loop. So now I've got 2 loops on my hand. And again, I always put my fingers through from back to front. And this is the first part of this stitch. The next thing we do is we're going to grab our next loop and we're going to pull it through all the loops that were on our hand. And that, my friends, is what we call a single crochet. So that's basically our first stitch, and we're going to repeat this process going all the way down. So I'm going to find my next loop on the left-hand side. So not here, because that's where I just went, but right here. I'm going to take my pointer finger and my thumb and go down through that loop. Grab my yarn, pull up a second loop. So now I have 2 loops on my fingers. Grab the yarn again and pull a loop through both of the loops that were on my hand, just like that. So this is where I just worked that one. You can see it's kind of stretched out, so I'm going to go to my next loop on the left, insert my fingers, grab a loop, put it on my fan, grab the yarn, and pull that loop through everything. And I'm going to keep repeating this process down the side of my project. And this is the basic stitch, and this is what we're going to be using for the rest of our project. So I did 8 chain stitches, so I'm going to do 8 of these kind of stitches, and then that'll be the end of my first row. Alrighty, so this is my first row. I did 8 stitches, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So I need to work a stitch in each of those ones. So to do this, I'm going to do the chain, which is where I just grab the yarn and pull up a loop. So I'm just going to end up with 1 loop on my hand, and I'm going to flip this whole thing over. So now I'm going to work on these loops on the left-hand side. So I'm going to work here and here and here and here, all the way down, doing the same stitch, the single crochet stitch that we did to make this big chunky row. So I'm going to reach through this loop on the left-hand side, pull up a second loop. I'm going to grab the yarn and pull it through both loops. On to the next loop. Insert my fingers, pull up a loop, and then pull a loop through both the ones that were already on my hand. And again, I'll do the same number of stitches every time. So I did 8 stitches, so I'm going to do 8 stitches every time I work across a row. So that's 1, 2, 3, I believe. So I'll have 5 more to go. So this is number 4, number 5. Here comes that color change. Number 6. Number 7. And last one, number 8. All right, so again, I'm at the end of my row because I've done 8 stitches. So I'm going to do 1 more chain, which is where I just pull an extra loop up through here. I'm going to take this and flip it from right to left. And now I'm going to work on these loops on the left-hand side. So come in this very first one right up here at the top. You can kind of see these along here. I'm going to work right in here and work the single crochet stitches. And I will just keep repeating this until my project is as big as I want it to be. And if you already know how to crochet, you can hand crochet other stitches in a similar fashion. You would just pretend that your hand is the crochet hook. So now I've done 3 rows here. A big tip is to just make sure that you do the same number of stitches every row, and that will keep it nice and even. And I'm just going to finish up working this, and then I'll show you my finished results. Ta-da! Here is my little rug. Isn't it so cute? So the last thing you need to know is, how do I finish this project? Really simple. I've got a loop here. I'm going to take all the rest of my yarn, which I only have a little bit, and I'm going to feed all of it through here. And I'm going to pull this tight, and you may need to kind of help snug it down. But it's just going to tighten up on itself and it won't come undone. So we're going to trim this a little bit shorter here. And then I'm just going to tuck this tail end in my stitches. So I'm just going to kind of hide it under there as best I'm able to. Just kind of tuck it in wherever I can. And I'll do the same thing with the tail from where we started. I'm just going to tuck it in along the edge here. Just come down through these stitches, kind of hide it in there. And of course, if you have all these little fluff spots on yours from the other color, you can, take this outside and brush it off or vacuum it off. But once you do that, you are good to go. And now you will have a cute little rug or whatever you want to turn this into. You could use this if you took two of these and put them together. It's thick enough that it could be like a pillow, like a travel pillow. Another thing I'll mention is if you have a towel that has a border on it, it will still work. That's what I ended up using on this one. And it's kind of cute, just these little butterflies and flowers and things peeking through. But that, my friends, is how you take an old towel and you upcycle it and hand crochet it into something else. Hey, thanks so much for watching my video. If you followed along, you now also have an awesome upcycled towel rug. Gonna put this on the floor, put my feet on it. You can't see it, but you can just imagine. Actually, you probably don't want to imagine my feet, but okay, we're just getting weird here. Anyways, thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, make sure that you leave a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe if you aren't already part of the crafting family, which on that note, super exciting news, I'm finally back into YPP, which is the YouTube Partner Program, which basically means that yes, you may see the occasional ad, but those ads are what help me be able to keep making videos because, I've got things like college and stuff to pay for. So I want to say thank you so much to everybody who continues to watch my videos, who has subscribed and has helped me reach those thresholds to get back into the YouTube Partner Program. I'm super excited. It's definitely got me very geared up to make a bunch of great videos this year. So I hope you will hit the subscribe down below and join the crafting family to see what other videos I will be bringing this year. Happy crafting!